Hello, and welcome back to Drawing Me Out with Bill Willingham. I'm Bill Willingham, and the one person here I'm not is Brad Tomte. Luckily, we have found our own Brad Tomte to fill that role. Say hello, Brad.
Hello, everyone. And it's kind of funny you say that because if you Google Brad Tomte, you only find me. I'm the one and only.
All right. Well, that's good. There are lots of Bill Willinghams if you Google out there. One of them I used to enjoy checking up on every once in a while is a soccer coach of a female soccer team, like high school soccer team, who is now doing time
Oh, no.
uh, because apparently something to do with him being the soccer coach of a female high school soccer team.
Sure.
So anyway, I'm not the only Bill Willingham out there, but hopefully I'm a slightly better one than some that are available or
Excellent.
not available for the next 10 to 15 years. All right. Maybe we should get back on subject. And in this case, our subject is we've been dealing with writing. Once again, the disclaimer that this is not a comprehensive lesson on how to write. I don't know how to do that. I'm a terrible teacher, but this is stuff that has worked for me or ideas I've had about the profession in which I'm involved. We've been dealing with first the getting ideas, executing your ideas. We've done naming, and now we're going to start building characters. The first character, the most important character in any story, is your protagonist. Almost as important as the antagonist, but we're going to deal with the protagonist this time. Protagonist is often the hero of your story, but not always. Protagonist is often the point of view character, but not always. As a matter of fact, one of the examples I'm going to use, the protagonist is kind of hidden and is behind the scenes pulling the strings for our point of view characters. Todd Alcott, who is a fine writer, he's a Hollywood screenwriter, and does a blog, I think at toddalcott.com, toddalcott, all one word.com. You'll have to check that. But he writes a regular column, or wrote. It goes away for a while every time he gets really busy. And so unfortunately for us, fortunately for him, he seems to be busy these days. But he wrote this blog that was so well spoken, and the title of it was "What Does the Protagonist Want?" Because what your main character, your protagonist, wants is probably the most vital part of building a character. There are all sorts of other things. What kind of whiskey does he like, since we were talking about whiskey? Who's his favorite sports team? Does he sleep late? Is he lazy? Is he athletic? What are his hobbies, etc.? His loves, his dislikes. Why is it that he can't stand the taste of asparagus? Whatever. All that's important. But for purposes of driving your story, the most important thing you need to know about your character, the one thing without which it's not time to start telling your story unless you figure this out yet, is what does your protagonist want? Brad, what are some of your favorite stories? Do you have any that come to mind?
When it comes to novels, the go-to for me is always going to be Heinlein's Star Beast.
Star Beast. Okay, so the protagonist in that, who was that? It's been a while since I read that.
John Thomas.
John Thomas.
Yep.
So he's the kid that gets involved with the Starby.
Correct.
As a matter of fact, wasn't it a pet at one point? Then it was determined. It was found out that it's actually a sentient character. So what does John Thomas want most in this story?
He wants to protect what he believes to be his pet from getting taken away.
Yeah, I think that if my memory serves, I think that's a good description. He wants to look after the Star Beast, the title character. I think also there's a something that was part of every Heinlein juvenile, which is he wants to be accepted as a reasoning adult.
Right.
A lot of his stories are coming of age stories, but that's part of it. That's part of, like, he wants to look after his his friend, the Star Beast, but he wants to have agency that only comes through being considered an adult in order to accomplish this. Everything that he's after is kind of focused towards that deal. See, right away we're getting to know John Thomas well because we know what he wants most. He wants to get out of trouble because he got into trouble looking after his, he wants to get his Star Beast out of trouble. All of that is a subset of what he wanted most. Any favorite movies?
Big fan of the Back to the Future trilogy.
Back to the Future.
That's my go-to.
Yeah, Back to the Future. If I recall, Marty McFly, what he mostly wants is to get home. Is that correct?
It seems like he's spending most of the movie trying to do that. Yep, get home to Jennifer. Yep.
So he's a Dorothy. Dorothy, of course, the archetypical character, the main character of the Wizard of Oz, who goes to this wonderful, wonderful world, and all she really wants is to get out of there to go home. So yeah, Marty McFly was a Dorothy. He wanted mostly to get home, but in order to get home, did he try to fix things, or did things he had to do to get home accidentally result in kind of fixing his life back in the past?
It kept pushing things down the line. He'd try and get home, and something else would happen, and something else would happen. And it's just like, I'm going back to bring you home. I'm going back to take care of this. He just couldn't get home without doing one more thing.
Yeah, and at some point we're going to deal with that if your protagonist gets what he wants right away, you don't have much of a story. The next obvious question to what does your protagonist want is what keeps him from getting what he wants, which we'll deal with. But now let's stay on the subject. So we have Dorothy, which is one of my examples of someone who most readers out there will know what she wants. She goes to the land of Oz and she wants to go home. That's about as elemental a motivation as one can get. Complicating that perhaps is the fact that she feels a little guilty for being there in the first place, since what she wanted at the beginning of the story was to run away. She thought that's what she wanted. She thought she wanted to leave the farm and she wanted to get off and have adventures and save her dog Toto from the evil old witch with a capital B. But as soon as she got away, she realized that, oh no, I made a terrible mistake. What I meant was I want to go home. And then the entire saga from that on is all of the things that prevent her from going home and the things she has to do in order to get back to where she belongs. Another of my favorite recurring characters is Tarzan. What does Tarzan, the character, want? Let's talk about the book. Forget the movies in which he is a subliterate moron. What does Tarzan, the character, want? Well, he's raised in the jungle by apes. At first, he wants to fit in with the tribe of apes, and he doesn't. He's clearly a freak. He doesn't realize that man is a separate species yet. So he wants to fit in. He wants to be a good big bull ape, and gets close, has adventures. When he meets other men for the first time and one of those other men kills his mother, he wants revenge. And then for the kind of the second quarter of the book, he wants revenge on the guy who killed his mother, the she-ape. And he does. He gets lots of revenge. And in the process, he discovers his humanity. He wants to know the secrets of the little cabin that he broke into and started teaching himself how to read with children's primers. So he wants a lot of things. But when Jane shows up, part of a group of castaways near his jungle home, everything gets thrown out the window. And then what does Tarzan want? Tarzan wants Jane. Tarzan wants Jane the way, the field wants the plow, the way the fish wants the ocean. That's what he wants. And the rest of that book and many books that follow are what does Tarzan do to get Jane. In the first book, it's all about winning Jane. And so he abandons his jungle life that he loved to become civilized and go to the world of civilization, because that's where Jane went, to win her, because that's a sacrifice he's willing to make. So That's another supplementary question. What does your character want? What things frustrate him getting what he wants? And what is he willing to sacrifice to get what he wants? Tarzan was willing to sacrifice his entire known world and life to enter a completely alien world because that was the price to get Jane. One of my favorites in 2001: A Space Odyssey, one of the discussions that happened on Todd Alcott's site was not only what do the protagonists want in 2001, but who are the protagonists? And me being the darling of the class, I got it right, so I'm proud of that. This is an example of the protagonists in some stories are hidden. Brad, you've seen 2001, haven't you?
I have.
2001: Space Odyssey. Who are the protagonists?
It's been a while since I've seen it. I know we've had this discussion before about the final answer, but I can't remember at this point.
Well, it's not anyone who's on the screen. As a matter of fact, the protagonists are never on the screen. The protagonists of 2001 clearly are the space aliens. The space aliens that are doing all the manipulative stuff and string pulling to get humankind on its way to uplift. Uplift is a term, I don't know if it was actually used prior to the David Brin novels, the Uplift Wars, but it's a term for taking a species and lifting them up in sentience, in sophistication, etc., to become a higher form of that species. Mankind were uplifting two species in the David Brin books, chimpanzees and dolphins, because they were fairly intelligent, and we were going to mechanically, medically, genetically alter them to increase their intelligence and sentiency. Well, the space aliens in 2001 are clearly that is their agenda. They're outside, they're interfering with mankind, and they do so first early on with the apes at the beginning of the story, and give them a little bump of here's a push in the right direction, and they use their monoliths to do so. And the lead ape named Moonwatcher, we found that out in the novelization. I don't think it was ever named in the movie. The lead ape touches the monolith and gets this kind of flash of inspiration that eventually forms into him realizing how to use these bones as weapons. And then he becomes a more sophisticated ape. He teaches the rest of his ape friends how to use bones as weapons, and they conquer the rival tribe, and mankind is on its way to greater sentiency. And then there's another monolith which they encounter on the moon. This is the only interference that the aliens do until we become a spacefaring race, which we go to the moon. So these are patient aliens. It's like they want to uplift mankind, but they've probably got several projects going all over the place, and this is one of them. And every once in a while, you just do a little something to push them on their way. So on the moon,
check in, see how things are going.
Right. And these monoliths are their tools to do that. Anyway, we end up with a space odyssey, a bunch of astronauts on their way to Jupiter, where some radio signal was beamed to find out what's going on. And it's their first contact with an alien artifact. So we have point of view characters. We've met Moonwatcher, the ape. We have additional point of view characters, Dave Bowman and Frank Poole, the astronauts on the Discovery. We have Haywood Floyd, their boss, who sends them on their way. And we have HAL 9000, the sentient computer that is aiding Dave and Frank on the thing. All point of view characters, none of them are the protagonists. Protagonists you will never meet directly. They're the ones pulling the strings saying, we want you to go. And apparently once you get to the moon, they buried it as like they found this other artifact, this other monolith. That was their indication of, okay, now it's time for another bit of interference because they've gotten this far. They're going to be uplifted to another thing. Shall we spoil this? I think we shall.
Okay, at this point, if folks haven't seen 2001, they've waited too long. So spoil away.
Well, it becomes a race to see who gets to encounter the big monolith around Jupiter. At some point along the way, Hal becomes the villain, the antagonist. In the sequels and stuff, there's a lot of gobbledygook about how Hal went crazy and went evil because he was given programming contrary to his basic core, whatever. He was told to lie and be secretive. Basically, everything Hal did was blamed on, evil interfering. Ooh, we mankind are the worst thing about being alive in the universe. I hate that. And for one thing, it's not that we're judging 2001 on its own. There's nothing to indicate that's the case. Hal, it's clear to me, it's early on seeded into the story that he is able to complete the mission even without the astronauts. And at some point, Hal realizes what the mission is. He realizes it, I think, before Frank and Dave would have. And the mission is contact the next space artifact, because whoever does that is getting another big bump up to become even more better, bigger of what they are. And Hal, who's like the first series of sentient computers, says, yes, this was my goal. I mean, he practically shouted it from the rooftops all along. My goal is to become fully sentient, considered a person in my own right. And now, if I get there first, I can get it from this thing. That's why he kills off all the other astronauts, the crew, and says, no, I'm going to go do it. Dave defeats him, goes on his journey, becomes the space baby with super space baby powers, which are hinted at but not revealed, and the movie ends. One of the things that I actually convinced, or at least got him to consider, was what does the space baby do next after the movie ends? And I said, that's written into the beginning of the movie. Just like Moonwatcher, the first thing he does when he gets bumped up is go create more of himself. And he was on his way to Earth, and he was going to go down to Earth and turn like more of himself into things like what he has now become. The next movie should have been a world of, maybe he doesn't do everyone. Maybe he selects a dirty dozen or whatever. But it's a world of super-powered space babies that are become super-powered adolescents or whatever. That was the next story. That was the story of 2001. Anyway, I got off on a digression because I'm opinionated about this. That's what the protagonist wants, and that is your story. When you build your protagonist, even if your protagonist is never actually going to be in the story, what your protagonist wants is the engine that drives it. And then the frustrations that occur are, what does the antagonist want? What frustrations does the protagonist have in achieving his goals? Can his goals be achieved? What he's going to have to sacrifice to do it. Interestingly enough, in 2001, there's no indication that the protagonist was frustrated in any way from their goals, because their goals is to uplift, interesting bioforms into intelligent species.
If anything, the only frustration might have been time and the slow movement of everyone else in discovering the next step to get there.
Yeah, maybe they got impatient. Maybe it's like, God, when are these idiots going to get on with
Right.
things? Like, over on Puba, they went from ape to accomplished spacefaring race in half the time. I would be interested, and we will never know because we cannot talk to Arthur C. Clarke or Stanley Kubrick, in knowing whether or not the space aliens would have cared if Hal got there first. What I'd really be interested in is doing the movie of if Hal got there first. They don't seem to have an extra $600 million to give to me and say, hey, make that interesting movie.
See?
Nope, I know. That, I think, covers what we have to say, and we're pretty much running out of time anyway. We will go on to talk more about villains and stuff later down the road. I know questions are piling up, and we may take another question thing next. But Brad, anything to add? What do you, the antagonist of this show, want?
I want everyone to go like, share, and subscribe. And I'm being frustrated by the fact that they haven't yet.
Well said. Thank you very much. We will continue. Goodbye. That may be an outtake you want to use.